Okay, so for my Emulating Emily project, I chose the poem The Feet of People Walking Home. So I will read that for you now. The feet of people walking home with gayer sandals go, the crocus till she rises, the vassal of the snow. The lips at hallelujah, long years of practice bore, till by and by these bargemen walked singing on the shore. Pearls are the divers farthings, extorted from the sea, pinions, the seraph's wagon, pedestrian once as we. Night is the morning's canvas, larceny, legacy, death, but our rapt attention to immortality. My figures fail to tell me how far the village lies, whose peasants are the angels, whose cantons dot the skies. My classics veil their faces, my faith that dark adores, which from its solemn abbeys such resurrection pours. So this is the key I used to annotate my poem because I'm kind of weirdly organized by that, like this. So that's how I annotated. Woo. Okay, so for the first stanza, the very first thing I noticed was in the first line, home is a metaphor for heaven. And after that, you can sort of deduce that this first stanza is just a long discussion of the happier passage to heaven. And I think that some of the key words would be gay or hallelujah singing, just like words that really key you into the happiness of getting into heaven. And she also uses personification in line 3, and then some nature terms like crocus and shore. So I think just in conclusion, the first stanza is about a happier waiting in heaven, which is in direct contrast with the second stanza, in which in the first two lines of the stanza, lines 9 and 10, she sort of compares getting into heaven as stealing. She says, pearls are the divers farthings extorted from the sea. So as divers steal pearls from the sea, we steal our way into heaven. I think it's a very interesting concept. It sort of shows Emily's hatred towards the church, or her distaste. I don't know how you would say it. But this stanza also uses some very key words: extorted, larceny, death. Just a very negative connotation of heaven and how people manipulate their way in there. And the third stanza is much more of a combination of the two. There isn't really a conclusive idea of what she views heaven to be. The first two lines of the stanza show her confusion, how she doesn't really know how far the village is, which is a metaphor for heaven, but she doesn't really know that much about it. It's still an unknown. But then Emily also uses comparisons like peasants and angels and faith and dark, which I think is very interesting because usually when you think of angels, you don't think of peasants, and faith isn't really dark. So it once again shows how she isn't really like the rest of her time and how they view heaven. So in conclusion, I think that Emily uses some very interesting word choice. She shows her negative view of religion and maybe part of the reason why, or maybe after she abandoned the church. And then about the actual poem, people manipulate their way in. And then the final paragraph represents confusion because we don't really know what heaven is. Heaven is still an unknown. So now it's time for my poem. All right. The feet of people walking home, their shoes pounding pavement. The sidewalk, how she beckons, the sun to heat cement. The kids dismissed from school, cars take the familiar road, waiting and wishing the light would change, all going in different modes. The emotionless drags his feet, ruined with rough days. Subways astir below ground. Once happy, he now pays. Work floods his brain and vision, finance, fame. Worthless, yet he needs something to claim. I can't be sure if this is what happiness really is, when lucky are the lonely, when nothing is ever his. The content are the happiest, but no one ever wins. To make do is all one can, when all one has is sins. So for the first stanza, I tried to replicate Emily's and make it one of the happier. So I sort of just talk about people going home. However, in my poem, home literally means going home after a hard day of work or at a fun day or a rough day at school. I use personification like Emily did in line 3, and just overall this stanza shows the happier way of going home, which is in contrast like Emily's second stanza. This is a much more negative stanza. I use alliteration in lines 14 and also in line 10 with ruined and rough and finance and fame. In this stanza, I sort of just I wanted to talk about people people valuing money over family and work and trying to get ahead just for the money. And yeah. And the third stanza sort of continues on with the same train of thought as the second one about how you need to have more than just money to be happy and that sort of thing. I use alliteration again in lines 19, and then I also have the same rhyme scheme as Emily does in all three stanzas. So, as in comparison, as you can see, they are the same stanza length, or same amount of stanzas, the same amount of lines. The lines are sort of almost the same length. Some of the words are longer that I used. It has the same rhyme scheme, and then I use personification in line 3 in both of my poems, or both of the poems personification. But one difference is just, well, the topic, obviously, she's talking about heaven, I'm talking about money and happiness, but then also one difference is that hers sort of, mine like digresses completely into complete negativity, while hers sort of is happy and then sad, but then sort of just inconclusive at the end. Mine just sort of goes all the way down to sinning. So that is my poem and Emily's poem, and that is the end.